Come in, come in. Ah, good to see you. Have a seat. Well, as you see, I'm back from the holiday, the messing about in boats, and indeed I took the Coot Club with me, and we had some glorious sailing in the very waters that the Coots and the Bird Protection Society sail in. But I'm no sooner back really than I'm off again, because I'm hence the rucksack leaning against the corner there. I'm anything in it yet, but I've got it out to make myself realise I can't unfortunately take the whole library. It's one of the things about going on pilgrimages. You have to realise that you can travel light. Anyway, I'm about to do a pilgrimage, a walking pilgrimage on the, it's called the Augustin Camino here. Originally, my friend and I who are doing it, my friend Sean and I, were going to do it following the route of the Chaucer's Canterbury pilgrims, and starting, of course, the Tabard Tavern no longer exists, but there's the George in Southwark, which is a wonderful old tavern going, it's sometimes referred to as Shakespeare's local. So we were going to start there, and we were going to, do the full route to Canterbury from there, but we don't have time. And also this new thing where you're not so much thinking about Thomas of Canterbury as you're thinking about Augustine of Canterbury, Saint Augustine, who was sent by Gregory to evangelise the English. And it goes from Rochester to Ramsgate, and it's about 7 days walking. Anyway, the thing that inspired us both, if I can find it now, here we are, look, yes. This is a really wonderful book. It's called The Old Road by Hilaire Belloc, from whom I've read to you before. I love this green cover with the gold on it. And it's a description of the old road to Canterbury. And it's a real sense of its history, a sense, of course, of the tragedy of when that old pilgrim road was destroyed in the Reformation, and all the pilgrim houses were rooted out and ruined. Of course, Belloc, as a Catholic, feels that quite strongly. But Belloc is also a historian, and he's got a tremendous sense of how the road is older even than the pilgrimage to Thomas Becket, and it's older and older. In fact, he begins the whole book with a kind of wonderful encomium of the road itself. The idea of a track or a pathway, a commonly used road, a thing we take absolutely for granted, as being one of the most ancient things there is, and more ancient than, famous, Grecian urns you could see in a museum. Let me just give you a bit of a character of this book. I'm going to take this book with me. This is one of the first things that's going to go into that green rucksack. And we'll read it together in the inns and hostelries that we'll stay in on the road, because Belloc, of course, is great on the subject of inns and hostelries. And we'll recite a bit of Chaucer together, no doubt, as well. So here's just a little sample. This is the very opening of The Old Road. On the road and the fascination of antiquity. There are primal things which move us. Fire has the character of a free companion that has travelled with us from the first exile. Only to see a fire, whether he need it or no, comforts every man. Again, to hear two voices outside at night after a silence, even in crowded cities, transforms the mind. A roof also, large and mothering, satisfies us here in the north much more than modern necessity can explain. So we built in the beginning, the only way to carry up our rains and to bear the weight of our winter snows. So he goes on to think of these simple things, fire, a roof, and then at last he comes to the road. Of these primal things, the least obvious, but the most important, is the road. It does not strike the sense as do those others I have mentioned. We are slow to feel its influence. We take it so much for granted that its original meaning escapes us. Men, indeed, whose pleasure it is perpetually to explore even their own country on foot, and to whom its every phase of climate is delightful, receive somewhat tardily the spirit of the road. They feel a meaning in it. It grows to suggest the towns upon it. It explains its own vagaries, and it gives a unity to all that has risen along its way. But for the mass, the road is silent. It is the humblest and the most subtle, but as I have said, the greatest and the most original of the spells which we inherit from the earliest pioneers of our race. It was the most imperative and the first of our necessities. It is older than buildings and than wells. Before we were quite men, we knew it, for the animals still have it today. They seek their food and their drinking places, and as I believe, their assemblies by known tracks that they have made. And he goes on to describe how roads have their own kind of wisdom, and sometimes a road seems to take a turn unnecessarily and you think you could go a straight away. But if you try going the straight away, you end up in a fen or a bog or against a precipice, and the road has found the right way. So the road becomes a symbol not only of any way or path or avenue in life, but a symbol of a kind of inherited wisdom, a kind of knowledge passed on about the best and simplest way to do things and to achieve them. So he starts with this wonderful encomium of the road. There's some wonderful illustrations in this book as well. And then, of course, he goes on to describe the old road, as he calls it, the road down to Canterbury. And we shall walk some portions of that together, and we shall enjoy it. So I have that, and I also have, this is a lovely little, it's completely blank journal book, which is made by someone in the same community as my mother and sister lived in, who gave us a little book to work with for my mother's funeral, and then she just gave me this one as a present, so I thought I'll take this and I'll keep a journal of the pilgrimage on its blank pages. It's a really beautiful book. So I shall have that and the actual Pilgrim Guide book. That's probably about as much as I can take book-wise, so I shall have to also draw on, when it comes to poetry, simply on the reservoirs of poetry in my own mind and in the mind of my friend Sean and our other friend George, who will join us later on as well, and we'll be three companions on the road. So I shall be away again, but I'll let you know when I'm back, and you must drop round and we'll see what adventures happen to us on the road as we follow in the steps of St. Augustine of Canterbury.